Every time I turn on the TV or scroll past one of these finance gurus, it's the same circus. One guy's telling you that 10 grand a month is plenty to retire on. The next guy's up there swearing you need $5 million in the bank before you even think about handing in your resignation. And I sit there and think, okay, which one of you has actually met a retiree? Because out here, in the real world, neither one of those numbers is what's happening. And the truth is a whole lot more forgiving than either of them wants you to believe. And before we get going, do me a favor. Down in the comments, tell me the real number, not the guru's number, yours. What's the monthly amount that would actually let you sleep at night? Now here's something I want you to sit with for a second. If you've been staring at your account balance, feeling sick because it doesn't have 7 figures sitting in it, I want to let you in on something most of the financial industry won't say out loud. The happiest retirees in this country are not millionaires. There's a quiet version of retirement happening right now, all across America, that nobody's putting on a billboard. People living full, comfortable, genuinely happy lives on somewhere around $2,500 a month. And today, I'm going to walk you through the actual data that shows you why you might already be closer to enough than you think. We're going to pick apart the fear-based numbers the industry likes to throw around. We're going to build out what I call your personal cost of working. We're going to look at why Social Security is quietly one of the biggest assets you already own, even if you've never thought of it that way. And by the end, I'll show you exactly how someone sitting on $200,000 can end up more secure than someone sitting on $1 million. So stick with me, because I'm also going to hand you the exact formula to find your own number before this video's over. Let's start with the number you've probably seen plastered everywhere, the idea that the average American needs $1.5 million just to retire. You've seen it in the headlines from the big brokerage firms. You've seen it quoted by every talking head with a nice suit and a studio lighting rig behind them. And here's the problem with that number. It's built on a word that sounds harmless, but is actually doing a lot of damage. The word is average. Let me show you exactly why average lies to you. Picture this. Jeff Bezos walks into a small neighborhood bar. 20 regular folks are sitting there nursing their beers, talking about their weekend. The second Bezos sits down at the end of the bar. The average net worth of everyone in that room jumps into the billions. Does that do a single thing for the guy in the corner with $20 in his wallet, worried about making rent? Not one bit. His life hasn't changed. His bank account hasn't changed. But if you looked at the average net worth of that bar, you'd walk away thinking everyone in there was a millionaire 20 times over. That's exactly what happens when these big firms calculate the average American's retirement savings. A small slice of ultra-wealthy households with 7, 8, 9 figures sitting in brokerage accounts drags the whole average sky high, and it makes the rest of us look like we're failing by comparison. It's not an honest number. It's a scary number. And scary numbers get clicks, and scary numbers sell financial products. And if you're the type who'd rather have the honest number than the scary one, hit subscribe now, because pressure testing guru numbers like this one is exactly what we do here. So instead of chasing average, we go find the median, the person standing dead center of the pack, with exactly as many people above them as below them. That's a number that actually reflects what a typical household is doing. And when you pull that number from the Federal Reserve's Survey of Consumer Finances, for households between 65 and 74 years old, the median retirement savings sits at roughly $200,000, not $2 million. $200,000. Hold on to that number, because before this video's over, I'm going to show you exactly how a retiree sitting on that exact amount ends up landing awfully close to the $2,500. Now, if the doom and gloom crowd was right, and you truly needed over $1 million just to survive retirement, we would be seeing millions of retirees living in absolute crisis. We'd see it on the news every night. We'd see empty pantries, foreclosed homes, chaos. But that is simply not what we see when we look around. We see retirees at the park in the morning. We see them on cruises with their grandkids in the summer. We see them showing up to their grandchildren's ball games on a random Tuesday afternoon because they finally have the time to be there. They are not scraping by in secret. They are doing just fine. And the reason is, they've mastered something the finance shows on television never spend enough time talking about: burn rate. Burn rate is simply how fast your money goes out the door every month. And over the next few minutes, I'm going to show you the real difference between two very different kinds of retirement. On one side, You've got a high-burn lifestyle, big house, 2 new cars in the driveway, eating out 5 nights a week, chasing the version of retirement you see other people posting online. That kind of lifestyle eats through a giant pile of savings, and yes, that person probably does need a couple $1,000,000 to make it last 30 years. But on the other side, you've got an intentional lifestyle, what I'm calling the invisible retirement, and that version runs on a whole lot less, without feeling like a sacrifice at all. At the end of the day, it was never really about how much you saved. It's about how much of it you actually get to keep. So let's bring some real data into this. Let's talk about the Bureau of Labor Statistics, specifically their Consumer Expenditure Survey, which is basically the gold standard for tracking exactly where American households send their money every single month. And here's the headline finding that most people have never heard. Household spending drops by close to $2,000 a month the moment people retire. Not because they're suddenly living smaller, sadder lives, because an entire category of spending simply disappears the day you stop punching the clock. Why does that happen? Because of something I call the cost of working. And most people have absolutely no idea how much of their paycheck is quietly being eaten by the simple act of having a job in the first place. It's not a line item on any budget spreadsheet. It's spread across a dozen small habits that only exist because you're employed. So let's build yours out right now, piece by piece. First up, the commute. Gas, tires, oil changes, insurance on that second car you're only keeping so you've got a reliable way to get downtown and back 5 days a week. Add up fuel, maintenance, parking, tolls, and depreciation. And on average, that alone runs about $5,000 a year for a typical commuter. That's not a luxury. That's just the toll booth you pay to show up to a job. Now here's the big one, and I think it's the one people underestimate the most. The convenience tax. When you're grinding through a 50 or 60-hour work week, you do not have time. You do not have energy. So you're grabbing the pre-cut vegetables at 3 times the price of a whole head of broccoli. You're paying $12 for a salad at lunch because you've got 45 minutes and a line out the door at every other option. You're ordering delivery on a Tuesday night because you walked in the door at 7:30, and the idea of cooking feels physically impossible. You're paying extra for fast on absolutely everything because you are exhausted, and exhaustion is expensive. And it's not just the big-ticket stuff. It's the wardrobe tax, the dress clothes and dry cleaning and presentable at the office shoes you'd never buy if nobody was watching. It's the coffee run because you didn't have time to brew a pot. It's the I deserve this purchase after a brutal week. Or the vacation you overspend on just to decompress from a job that's been grinding you down for 11 months straight. None of that is weakness. It's just what a full-time job quietly does to a person's spending. And underneath all of it, there's the life insurance and disability coverage you carry specifically to protect a paycheck, plus the 401k contribution that turns into extra cash flow the day you stop working instead of a deduction. None of it shows up on a budget worksheet. All of it feeds into that $2,000 figure the Bureau of Labor Statistics keeps finding. The moment you retire, all of that quietly starts to disappear. You get your time back. You can cook from scratch, 3 meals a day if you want to, because you actually have the hours in your day for it. You can shop the sales instead of grabbing whatever's closest to the checkout line. You can run your errands at 10 in the morning on a Tuesday instead of fighting rush hour traffic both ways, saving gas and saving wear on the car in the process. You can go to bed at a reasonable hour instead of needing a treat to survive the week. The version of you that exists in retirement spends less, not because they're depriving themselves, but because an entire category of cost of working expenses simply doesn't apply to their life anymore. Now let's put a real number on this, because I don't want to leave this abstract. Fidelity's research shows most retirees only need to replace somewhere between 55 and 80% of what they earned while working in order to maintain the exact same standard of living. Let's run 2 quick examples so you can see how this scales. Say you're bringing home $75,000 a year while working. A good chunk of that, call it $20,000, is quietly going toward payroll taxes, and this entire cost of working tax we just walked through, commute, wardrobe, convenience, all of it combined, which means $45,000 a year in retirement can feel exactly like $75,000 did while you were punching the clock. That's the first invisible raise you get the day you stop commuting. Now let's scale it down, because plenty of people watching this aren't pulling in $75,000. Say you're bringing home $45,000 a year. Using that same 55 to 80% range, you might only need somewhere between $25,000 and $36,000 a year in retirement to live the exact same lifestyle you're living right now. The lower your working income, generally speaking, the smaller that cost of working tax tends to be in absolute dollars, but it's still there, and it still matters. Now, if you've stuck with me this far, this is the part I actually want you here for, because everything we've covered so far is just the setup. In a minute, I'm going to show you a number that sounds almost too big to be real, a number most people are already holding on to without realizing it, and it changes everything we just walked through. Let's get to the piece that gets the least respect in this entire conversation: Social Security. This is the foundation the entire invisible retirement is built on top of, and almost nobody talks about it the right way. As of January 2026, the Social Security Administration's own numbers put the average monthly benefit at just over $2,070 for an individual. For a married couple both drawing benefits, that's around $4,100 a month. Call it just under $50,000 a year, guaranteed, showing up in your account like clockwork for as long as you're alive. Now watch what happens when we combine that average individual benefit with the median retiree's own savings. Take the $200,000 median nest egg from earlier and apply that same 4% rule. That's $8,000 a year, or about $665 a month coming out of savings. Add that to the average individual Social Security check of $2,070, and you land at roughly $2,700 a month before you've touched a single one of the three levers coming up. Factor in a lower cost of living area, a paid-off house, or a small bridge job trimming what you pull from savings, and that number settles in right around $2,500 a month. Not a hypothetical. The median American retiree, using nothing but the numbers we've already covered. The typical financial advice treats Social Security like an afterthought, a nice little supplement, a backup plan, something you tack onto the end of a retirement plan, almost as an apology. I'd push back on that completely. Let's look at it the way it actually deserves to be looked at, as a lump sum asset, every bit as real as a stock portfolio or a paid-off house. If you wanted to generate that same $49,000 a year out of a 401k, using the standard 4% withdrawal rule, the rule that's been the industry benchmark for decades for how much you can pull from a portfolio each year without running out of money, you would need $1.2 million sitting in that account. $1.2 million just to replicate what an average couple's Social Security check is already handing them for free. Let that land for a second. If you and your spouse are both drawing an average Social Security benefit, you are effectively holding a $1.2 million annuity backed by the full weight of the United States government. And unlike a private annuity you'd buy from an insurance company, this one comes with a built-in cost of living adjustment, meaning it actually rises with inflation almost every single year. Try finding a private product on the open market that does that for free. You won't. There's also a piece of this that most people never think through, which is claiming age. You can start Social Security as early as 62, at full retirement age around 67, or wait all the way until 70 for a significantly larger check. Waiting from 67 to 70 can boost your monthly benefit by roughly 24%. That's not a small detail. That's potentially hundreds of extra dollars a month for the rest of your life, just for being patient a few extra years if your health and circumstances allow for it. So the next time some talking head tells you that the average American needs $1.5 million to retire, understand this. They've already left out the fact that you're walking into retirement with the equivalent of $1.2 million in guaranteed, inflation-protected income before you've saved a single extra dollar yourself. You're not starting from zero. You're starting from a massive head start that most of these so-called experts are conveniently forgetting to mention. Now, I already know what some of you are thinking, because I hear it in the comments every time I bring up Social Security. Bob, what about inflation? What if the program runs into trouble? Fair questions. But Social Security already comes with a built-in cost of living adjustment most private pensions never offer, and even the most conservative long-range projections show the program continuing to pay out a large majority of scheduled benefits, even under a worst-case funding scenario. Not a program that vanishes overnight. That's not a reason to ignore the conversation. but it's also not a reason to build your whole plan around the fear that the check simply won't show up. So how do you close whatever gap is left between your Social Security and your actual lifestyle? There are really 3 levers here, and I want to walk you through each one in detail, because this is where the invisible retirement actually gets built. Lever 1 comes from research by financial researcher Michael Stein, who mapped out what's called the spending smile. Picture a smile shape on a graph. From 65 to 75, what he calls the go-go years, people tend to spend more because they're active, they're traveling, they're checking things off the bucket list, while their health and energy are still strong. This is when people take that trip to Europe, when they help fund a grandchild's wedding, when they finally buy the boat or the RV they talked about for 30 years. From 75 to 85, the slow-go years, spending naturally eases off. The big trips slow down, the home projects wind down, life gets a little quieter, and so does the spending that goes with it. And past 85, the no-go years, spending levels out and shifts almost entirely toward healthcare and daily living, rather than travel and adventure, largely because energy and mobility naturally change the way people use their time. The point of all this is simple. You don't need a flat paycheck for 30 straight years. You need a plan that expects your discretionary spending to taper roughly 20% as the decades go on, with healthcare picking up some of that slack later in life. Most retirement calculators online assume you'll spend the exact same inflation-adjusted amount every single year from 65 to 95. And that assumption alone is scaring people into working 5 or 10 extra years they didn't actually need to work. Lever 2 is housing. And I think this one deserves way more attention than it usually gets. AARP's research shows about 77% of people over 50 say they want to stay right where they are as they age. And I get it completely. It's familiar, it's comfortable, it's full of memories. But sometimes your house is quietly functioning as its own version of the cost of working tax we talked about earlier. A big property tax bill in a high cost of living area. Utility costs on square footage you don't need anymore now that the kids are grown and gone. A second story you're going to need to navigate less easily as the years go on. Maintenance costs on a yard and a roof and a driveway that's simply bigger than your life requires today. If you move from a high property tax area to a more affordable retirement-friendly spot, or if you downsize from the family home into something smaller, and pocket $100,000 in equity along the way, you've just funded close to a decade of the invisible retirement lifestyle in a single move. And if staying in your home matters to you more than anything else, there are still options. Renting out a spare room, looking into a reverse mortgage, or simply refinancing to lower your monthly obligation. The goal isn't to force everyone into a smaller house. The goal is to make sure your housing situation is a choice you're actively making, rather than a habit you're passively funding. Lever 3 is healthcare. And this is the fear that keeps more people working past 65 than almost anything else. People stay at a job they don't even like anymore purely because they're terrified of what happens to their health insurance the moment they walk away. But here's what the data actually shows. Once Medicare kicks in at 65, your healthcare costs become capped and a whole lot more predictable than they were while you were relying on private insurance. Medicare Part A covers hospital stays. Part B covers doctor visits and outpatient care. Part D covers prescription drugs. And research from the Kaiser Family Foundation shows that once you're inside that system, with a Medicare supplement or Medigap policy layered on top if you choose one, your out-of-pocket exposure becomes something you can actually plan around, instead of an open-ended, unpredictable risk hanging over your head every single year. The people living the invisible retirement aren't fearless about healthcare. They're informed about healthcare. They understand exactly what the system covers, what it doesn't, and what a reasonable supplemental policy costs to fill in the gaps. That knowledge alone removes an enormous amount of the anxiety that's currently keeping people chained to a desk long after they're financially ready to leave. And here's the lever nobody talks about enough, because it doesn't fit neatly into a spreadsheet. Retirement today isn't about sitting in a recliner doing absolutely nothing for 25 years. It's about doing what you actually want to do with your time. And there's a very real financial upside hiding inside that shift, one that most retirement calculators completely ignore. If you find something you genuinely enjoy for even 10 hours a week, consulting in your old field, teaching a class at the community center, working the counter at a hardware store because you actually like talking to people, tutoring, freelancing, whatever it is, and it brings in even $500 a month, you've just pulled off a bit of financial magic that most people never even consider. Here's the math behind why. $6,000 a year pulled straight out of a brokerage account, using that same 4% rule, would require $150,000 sitting there just to sustain it safely. So if you don't happen to have an extra $150,000 lying around, and let's be honest, most people don't worry about it. Find a way to bring in about $125 a week doing something you love, and you've effectively created $150,000 of retirement wealth out of thin air without ever having saved that money at all. Push that up to $1,000 a month, and you've just replicated a $300,000 portfolio. This is what I call the side hustle multiplier, and it's one of the most underused tools in the entire retirement conversation, partly because it doesn't fit neatly into a brokerage statement, and partly because nobody selling you a financial product makes a commission off of you deciding to work part-time doing something you love. So now let's put all of this together, because I promised you a formula, and I meant it. Here's exactly how you find your own number, step by step. Start with your actual monthly expenses in retirement, not your current working expenses, your retirement expenses, after you strip out the cost of working tax we walked through earlier. Be honest with yourself here. Write down housing, food, insurance, transportation, and whatever discretionary spending genuinely matters to your quality of life. Next, subtract your guaranteed income. That's your Social Security benefit, and if you have one, any pension income on top of it. Whatever's left over after that subtraction, that's your actual gap. That's the number you genuinely need your savings to cover, not the scary 7-figure number some brokerage firm put in a headline to get you to click. So now let's put all of this together, because I promised you a formula, and I meant it. Here's exactly how you find your own number, step by step. Start with your actual monthly expenses in retirement, not your current working expenses, your retirement expenses, after you strip out the cost of working tax we walked through earlier. Be honest with yourself here. Write down housing, food, insurance, transportation, and whatever discretionary spending genuinely matters to your quality of life. Next, subtract your guaranteed income. That's your Social Security benefit, and if you have one, any pension income on top of it. Whatever's left over after that subtraction, that's your actual gap. That's the number you genuinely need your savings to cover, not the scary 7-figure number some brokerage firm put in a headline to get you to click. Finally, take that monthly gap, multiply it by 12 to get your annual gap, and divide that number by 4%. Or, if you want a quick shortcut, just multiply your annual gap by 25. That is the real number you need in savings, not $1.5 million pulled out of thin air. Your number, built from your actual life, your actual Social Security benefit, and your actual spending plan. For a whole lot of people watching this right now, once you run the math honestly, that number is dramatically smaller than anything you've been told to be afraid of. And for some of you, once you factor in a modest bridge job or a smart housing decision, that gap closes almost entirely. Retirement was never really about hitting some giant number a stranger on a stage picked for you. It's about the gap between what's coming in every month and what actually needs to go out. And once you know your real cost of working, treat Social Security like the asset it actually is instead of an afterthought. Respect the spending smile instead of planning for 30 flat identical years. Make an honest, unemotional call on housing, and stay open to a little purposeful work along the way. That gap gets a lot smaller than anyone selling you a financial product wants you to believe. This invisible retirement is happening all around you right now, quietly, without a headline. At the park in the morning, on the porch in the evening, at a grandkids' ball game on a random Tuesday afternoon. Not one person living it is a millionaire. They just did the math honestly, once, instead of letting fear make the decision for them. You're not behind. You've just been looking at the wrong number the whole time. So before you go, down in the comments, give me your real number. What's the monthly figure you're actually aiming for once you strip away all the noise? Let's keep this conversation going.